We often view the human act of inhaling smoke as a modern habit or recent agricultural invention. But long before humans cultivated leaves or manufactured industrial cigarettes, our distant ancestors were already breathing in a complex airborne chemical cocktail. They likely did not initially plan to alter their own waking consciousness. They were simply trying to survive and stay warm on freezing nights. This respiratory exposure happened mostly by accident around early cooking fires. To understand how this mechanism worked, we must look at early hominids. Archaeologists have found charred animal bone and burnt plant ash deposited inside Wonderwerk Cave located in South Africa. These remains date back roughly 1 million years in ancient time. The available evidence indicates that Homo erectus maintained sustained and controlled fires there. Our hominid cousins possessed noticeably smaller brains and much heavier brows. They gathered closely around glowing hearths to cook meat and share warmth. But living inside an enclosed cave with an active burning fire meant they faced constant thick wood smoke. It was essentially the original indoor air quality crisis, and nobody had a ventilation fan. When you burn organic material, the intense heat breaks down molecules. This thermal process releases carbon dioxide and various airborne chemical compounds. Some wild flora naturally contain protective alkaloids and psychoactive plant terpenes. If you throw these branches onto a hot, open cooking fire, those active compounds become instantly airborne. You might sit in a poorly ventilated kitchen while burning your dinner, and your eyes will immediately water. The dense smoke carries tiny particles directly into your sensitive respiratory system. For early humans, this atmospheric reality meant they regularly inhaled psychoactive plant chemicals just by sitting downwind during dinner. The human nervous system naturally contains a built-in endocannabinoid network. This biological signaling system helps regulate human mood, appetite, and basic memory. It functions as a chemical pathway where distinct molecules fit perfectly into cellular receptors like a corresponding key. These physical receptors evolved long before anyone intentionally harvested wild cannabis plants. When airborne plant cannabinoids eventually entered the warm lungs of early humans, they passed directly into the bloodstream. The chemical molecules then traveled upward and bound to those specific receptors. This accidental respiratory exposure could induce noticeable changes in mental states. An ancient hunter inhaled thick smoke and felt unexpectedly relaxed shortly afterward. The psychological connection between burning plants and altered states of human mind was likely discovered through countless repetitions. But noticing an accidental chemical effect is different from deliberate intentional practice. Tracing exactly when our ancestors started inhaling smoke on purpose remains difficult. Organic materials like carved wooden pipes or dried plant leaves quickly decay. They rarely survive thousands of long years buried in wet, damp soil. Carved stone tools last almost forever, but woven plant fibers simply dissolve. However, modern researchers have found rare direct physical evidence in dry environments. In the Pamir Mountains of Central Asia, archaeologists carefully excavated an ancient burial dating to roughly 500 BC. They discovered carved wooden braziers containing river stones that had been superheated. Alongside these thermal stones, researchers found organic residue from potent cannabis plants. The physical evidence suggests ancient people placed the raw plants onto hot stones to intentionally release the psychoactive smoke. They likely contained the rising vapor. This archaeological finding aligns closely with early written Greek historical accounts. The ancient historian Herodotus vividly describes Scythian nomadic groups performing similar rituals. He noted they built small tents and threw raw hemp onto stones. The nomadic people would sit inside and deeply inhale the thick vapors. For many generations, later skeptical historians assumed he was exaggerating his wild observations, but the Pamir Mountain site excavations strongly indicate he simply reported facts. While the Central Asian site is old, other discoveries push the human timeline much further into our distant past. In the vast Great Salt Lake Desert, researchers excavated an ancient hearth. This remote Utah site dates back roughly 12,000 years ago. Inside the ancient cooking hearth, they found charred seeds from a wild tobacco species. The unusually concentrated seed placement suggests that ancient people deliberately gathered the plant. They may have thrown the tobacco into the open fire during rituals. At that point in time, humans were already spreading rapidly across multiple different continents. If nomadic people in North America used wild tobacco 12,000 years ago, other human groups likely experimented with their own local native psychoactive flora. Anthropologists sometimes refer to this behavioral pattern as the broad intoxication hypothesis. The available biological evidence supports the idea that many animal species seek altered states. Wild elephants sometimes consume fermented fruit that falls heavily to the forest floor. In frozen Siberia, wild reindeer deliberately eat specific psychoactive mushrooms for chemical effects. They occasionally even drink the urine of other reindeer that consumed them, doing a highly efficient form of recycling. Early human groups likely tested thousands of local wild plants over generations. They slowly learned which smoke helped and which plant smoke caused harm. This prehistoric botanical trial and error carried extremely high personal survival stakes. A wrong choice could prove fatal, which is an unforgiving way to learn botany. But the observant humans who survived passed that practical knowledge down orally. Before humans invented written text or libraries, lived experience guided daily group survival. Information flowed primarily from mouth to ear around glowing fires in the deep dark. This ancient shared knowledge eventually extended beyond basic recreation or spiritual ritual. Early human societies also used plant smoke in highly practical medical applications. They inhaled herbal vapors as early medicine. The Ebers Papyrus from ancient Egypt, dating back to 1550 BC, meticulously documents various early medical treatments. It describes deliberately heating specific herbs to treat chronic throat and lung conditions. The ancient Greeks also actively utilized therapeutic herbal smoke for respiratory ailments. To most modern people, inhaling smoke for improving lung health sounds counterintuitive. But the underlying biological mechanism relies on how the human lungs function. The lungs contain millions of microscopic tiny air sacs surrounded by blood vessels. These delicate sacs absorb airborne molecules rapidly. When you step into a hot shower and deeply breathe in the thick steam, the warm moisture enters your airways instantly. The ancient Egyptian physicians recognized this highly direct physical pathway into the body. If a native plant like toxic henbane contained chemical compounds that reduce spasms, delivering it straight through the lungs made perfect logical sense at the time. The rising smoke carried the active chemicals directly to the affected respiratory tissues. Modern respiratory medicine still uses this pathway. Daily asthma inhalers deliver targeted aerosolized medications straight into the sensitive lung tissue. We wisely kept the rapid delivery mechanism but thankfully discarded the burning ash. In ancient India, comprehensive Ayurvedic texts describe a medical practice called Dhumapana. This therapeutic system involved inhaling medicinal herbs through carefully carved, specialized wooden pipes. The texts detailed specific native plants for treating various physical human ailments. Without modern synthetic antibiotics or chemical drugs, early physicians relied on observable physical results. If a specific treatment provided minor relief, they systematically continued using the method. The long survival of these smoke practices suggests they offered some marginal clinical benefit. However, beyond individual physical health and treatment, smoke played a much deeper social role. Early human survival depended almost entirely on maintaining very strong group cohesion. An isolated prehistoric individual faced constant danger, but a highly coordinated group often survived. Shared rituals act as exceptionally powerful tools for building deep trust among community members. Modern behavioral neuroscience shows that participating in highly synchronized group physical activities can align complex neural patterns across individuals. When people experience slightly altered states together in a confined shared space, it fosters deep psychological human connections. Imagine standing outside on a freezing night sharing a quiet moment around a fire. For ancient nomadic groups facing harsh environments, this shared sensory ritual built vital solidarity. The ancient smoke circle became social infrastructure. It helped forge the strict mutual reliance needed to survive dangerous cooperative animal hunts. In the ancient Americas, indigenous cultures deeply integrated tobacco into their sacred rituals. They used the plant to bind agreements and quietly communicate with unseen spiritual realms. The rising smoke served as a messenger carrying human intentions upward toward the sky. Because the shared practice held sacred value, native communities regulated its consumption very carefully. It was certainly not a casual habit used mindlessly during a brief afternoon break. This deep cultural reverence kept the substance tied firmly to specific established social boundaries. The historical transition from sacred community ritual to casual global consumption changed everything. When European maritime explorers reached the Caribbean, they observed indigenous people inhaling tobacco smoke. Christopher Columbus noted native groups using small burning sticks of rolled, dried leaves. The curious explorers soon tried it themselves and eventually brought the plants back home. Within a few short decades, imported tobacco spread rapidly across global trade. By the early 20th century, clever industrialists invented the mass-manufactured paper cigarette. This fundamentally altered the biological dynamic between modern humans and the ancient plant. They intentionally engineered the new commercial product to deliver addictive nicotine much faster. The aggressive mass-market approach eventually bypassed the traditional cultural and natural social limits. A ritualistic practice that evolved slowly over thousands of careful ancestral years was transformed into a highly profitable and physically destructive modern global industry. The original sacred communal human purpose disappeared behind vast commercial scale and chemical addiction. We will probably never definitively find the exact moment someone smoked intentionally. The oldest surviving physical archaeological artifacts take us back 12,000 years in human time. But the underlying human behavioral drive to alter daily perception and bond through shared ritual likely stretches much further back into antiquity. Generations of ancient nomadic people breathe the exact same complex wood smoke you smell at a modern summer campfire. The history of smoking slowly reveals how deeply we remain tied to our environment. We have always sought novel, natural ways to slightly change how we experience reality.